we talked about a lot of things in general last time we met. We were down to about verse 45, pretty close to where I didn't mark exactly because we talked about several different things. It's all inclusive in the Jesus' traumatic experience on the cross. Now, I think we got down to verse 45 where we talked about the being dark in the middle of from noon to 3 o'clock, which is worse than that's more than any eclipse that I've ever remember hearing. The regular eclipse don't last 3 hours. Someone asked about the how long was it dark during the plagues on Egypt, and it was 3 days. Exodus chapter 10, is that right, Leland? You both come up same. Exodus chapter 10, and the darkness lasted 3 days. It said it was so dark you could feel the darkness. In Exodus, I asked Leland, I said, have you ever been in sure enough, a cave when it turned out to light? He said, no, and I said, well, I have. And you can almost feel the darkness because it's total. It's total. It says about the 9th hour, which will be around 3 o'clock, the way we count time today. So Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which they say means, my God, why have you forsaken me? And some of those who were standing there, when they heard it, began saying, this man is calling for Elijah. Now, my commentary at the bottom has something that I never heard before, and then I guess they said it was a common thinking that in that day and time that since Elijah was called up to heaven without dying, it was thought that he would come back to protect them. And it says that at Passover, when people, each family, when they prepared a meal, they would leave one empty plate, and that was in case Elijah came back. That was their custom. That's what it says. Now you take that for whatever it's worth. That's what my commentary says. I never heard that before. Colin, you ever hear that? Or Bob, you ever?
I've heard it, and my understanding is that there are still people today that still practice that as a custom.
Still practice it as a custom. Okay. Now, I'm just going through this, reading the commentary, and I thought, well, that's something new on me, I didn't. Why did Jesus say, God, why have you forsaken me? He'd taken on our sins, okay, and God can't have anything to do with sin. He was separated completely. He was separated completely. And he had always been on for lack of a better term, a one-on-one relationship with God. They thought the same things. They taught the same things. They practiced the same things. In fact, whenever it talks about the creation, Jesus was there. Jesus was involved. Now he has been separated from God. Besides the physical pain and all the other stuff that goes on with the cruel way that the Romans treated people who they crucified, he was also separated from God. And he'd never experienced that before. This is why he said, why have you forsaken me? Verse 48 says, immediately one of them ran and taking a sponge, he filled it with sour wine and put it on the reed and gave him a drink. But the rest of them said, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him. Like I said, these are people there looking for Elijah to come back. What about the experience of Elijah? Does anybody remember the experience of Elijah when he was here on earth? He's one of two people that never had to die who left this earth. What was his experience? Anybody remember? Do what? No, you got it backwards. The chariot separated them in the world. Then the whirlwind got him, yeah. Elijah was walking with Elisha, which is confusing as it is. Both of them were prophets, and Elijah is the older one, Elisha is the younger one. It says the fiery chariot, I don't care how good the song is, come down, let me ride. Elijah didn't ride on that chariot, but it said it separated them, and then a whirlwind caught up Elijah, and Elisha never saw him anymore. But it was evidently a very common thing to think since Elijah didn't die that he's going to come back. And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. Now it doesn't record it here, does it? What is the last thing that records him saying? It is finished. Which means more than I'm dying, I'm dead, or whatever. It means I've done everything I was supposed to do. It runs deeper than just, well, I'm dead, you know. You've got to talk louder.
It was completed.
Everything was completed. He done everything he was supposed to do. Everything was prophesied that he would do. Everything it was planned for him to do, he had completed. Behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two, from top to bottom, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split, the tombs were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised, and coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they entered the holy city and appeared to many. A lot of things just happened in those few verses right there, so we don't want to slip past anything. It says the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. First question is, what was the veil? Separated the most holy place. What was behind the veil?
Ark.
The what?
The Ark of the Covenant.
Ark of the Covenant. And several other objects that I've forgotten. It's been a while since I read.
That's where God would be.
That's where God would be. That's the most important thing. That's where God would be. Now, what does it represent when it says the temple, the veil was torn from top to bottom? Access? Okay.
God was made available to every day.
God made it available to everybody. I always like to say God has left the building. He's not confined to that. That's not the only place you have access to him anymore. He's left the building.
They say the veil was about 10 inches thick.
Okay. David says that he thought the veil was supposed to be about 10 inches thick, which would make it very improbable for a man to. A man was started at the bottom and ripped it up from bottom to top most cases. It's ripped from top to bottom. It says that the tombs were open and many of those who were dead were raised and appeared after, they come out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection. This particular set of verses, this statement here is kind of, you got to be careful with it. It's kind of out of place, really. It really, to me, it ought to have been something that leads you to think, well, they come out right then, but they didn't. Jesus was the first one. Jesus wrote, these come out after Jesus was raised again. My question is, and I don't have an answer, did these people go to heaven or did they have to die again? Or did they appear to others and go back to the grave? I have no answer for it.
They couldn't go to heaven until Judgment Day.
Couldn't go to heaven at Judgment Day?
So they probably went back to the grave.
Right?
Doesn't say.
Anybody else got any ideas? Bob, you got any ideas on this?
Well, Hebrews says it's appointed for man once to die, and after that, judgment. So even if they were raised from the dead, their eternal judgment was probably already secure at that time.
Okay.
And so being raised back to life probably didn't have any effect on that.
Okay. So, Jesus raised Lazarus from dead, but Lazarus had to die again. But these people, they've been married for quite a while. And it was, Paul said to be, and I can't get my head on it, I just like how he quoted it, but anyway, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. That's the way it says it, but it didn't get messed up too bad.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, that's it. I don't have an answer for this, that I can pinpoint and say this is definitely what, other than, we was talking about here a while ago back there in the back, Judy Jones, she's been to a place in, somewhere between here and in Albuquerque somewhere, I forget what town she said she's close.
Groom, Texas.
Groom, Texas, and there's a new park, if you will. It's dedicated to Jesus' death. It's got cross, it's got a tomb, and you got a lot of pictures. But anyway, we talked about the deal in Eureka Springs, and years ago, and I didn't hear them say it this time, but years ago they claimed that we are 100% scripturally correct. And in the early years when I went twice, I thought I had them. I went back and read the Bible, and they was right and I was wrong. But anyway, and this was one of them. They had people coming out of the graves, and I completely forgot about that. I thought, boy, I got you now.
What did they do? Did they ascend into heaven, or did they
No,
walk?
they just showed them coming out of the graves. That's part of the play. But and then it's been 40-something years, so I may have forgotten exactly. But I thought, well, I've got you now. And then they had Jesus going up in the ascension to heaven from the upper room. I thought, well, I got you on this one. So next time I went, I'm watching, Well, they hadn't figured out a way to get him to go out of sight so that the scenery in the upper room changed to look like it was all clouds, and so that's how he went up the cloud in, that's the only way they could figure out about it. So those two times, I couldn't find anything wrong. I thought I had it, but they was right and I was wrong.
Well, in this situation, that probably just needs to be on your list of things to ask when you get to heaven.
Yeah, that's there's a gentleman here a long time ago, and I can't remember his name. He was a Bible scholar from Oklahoma Christian University, and they say he's even got his own translation. You may know what his name is. I can't.
Go McCord.
That's it. And he made, when he got through speaking, has anybody got any questions? And so there's questions all over the house. Somebody asked a real difficult question, and he said, when I get to heaven, that's the first thing I'm going to ask Paul. Why didn't he make that a little more plain, And that way there wouldn't be any confusion about it. He should have made it a little more plain.
Well, it says God's ways are higher than our ways, and so that in itself could lend,
And his
Yeah,
way,
yeah,
his
yeah.
ways are past finding out.
yes.
You know,
that,
so, just cause we can't figure it out, doesn't mean there's not an answer, just means we can't figure out what the answer is. Yes, sir.
Even though, our body just goes back to the dirt. But there's places like paradise and Hades
Okay,
where the spirit stays until judgment.
okay. Verse 54, now the centurion and those who were with him, keeping guard over Jesus, when they saw the earthquake and the things that were happening, became very frightened and said, truly this was the Son of God. So even these centurions, these, I won't say evil, a lot of these soldiers were practically evil as far as we'd be concerned today. You know, they had no scruples, you know, and yet the happenings here were so unusual, it might be the best word for that, something they had never seen. This guy had to be the Son of God. Something very, very unusual, very miraculous has happened. It could even convince them. So many women were there looking on from him from a distance. I added a word there, I'll start again. Many women were there looking on from a distance, who had followed Jesus from Galilee while ministering to him. Among them was Mary Magdalene, and Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. These ones that Matthew names. What is it? Now this Mary, this the mother of James and Joseph. And Jesus had brothers whose names is James and Joseph. Is this her, or is this another Mary? There's lots of Marys, like there's lots of Jameses. Anybody got any ideas, or didn't make any difference, I guess. But we do know that Jesus' mother was there because Jesus had said, looked on John, and John said, behold, she's your mother, you take care of her. Even though he had brothers, he said, you take care of her, just like she's your mother. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who himself had also became a disciple of Jesus. This man went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him. And Joseph took the body and wrapped it in clean linen cloth and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn out in the rock. And he rolled a large stone against the entrance of the tomb and went away. And Mary Magdalene was there, and the other Mary sitting opposite the grave. Okay, Matthew doesn't include a lot of stuff here that we know that happened. Who else helped Joseph of Arimathea bury Jesus?
Nicodemus.
Nicodemus. How do we know Nicodemus?
John chapter 3.
Huh?
John chapter 3.
Okay, you knew what chapter it was. Now tell us the story.
He goes to Jesus by night.
Yeah.
Wants to talk to him more about what he's been teaching. He's interested. Then we really don't hear a whole lot from him for a while. And we just get a little snippets here and there, and kind of get the picture that he's starting to follow along
Yeah.
on his own.
What is the statement that Jesus makes to him, and he questions the question? Jesus said, except you be born again,
Both water and spirit.
both water and spirit, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. And what did Nicodemus ask? The question?
How could he enter his mother?
How can a man go back into his mother's womb when he's old? So he's thinking, Jesus is thinking spiritual things, Nicodemus is thinking sure enough earthly things. verse 62.
Well,
Go ahead.
just, Joseph was probably the first proprietor of the first Airbnb. Because he knew that Jesus only needed it for the weekend.
Only needs a weekend, okay? But, you know, it was his tomb, and we're fixing to get into that, if we, in our time here, that, you know, it's his tomb. He dug it himself, right, it says. It wasn't like we dig a grave, it was a hole in the side of the hill and a big rock. And he took Jesus and he rolled the stone in front of himself. And like I said, we know Nicodemus was there to help him. Then we find later that the Jewish leaders, they get involved in. But anyway, he does all this on his own. And so yes, you know, he was him and Nicodemus, I think both are leaders of the Jewish Sanhedrin one age, but they become convinced that the majority of the Sanhedrin is wrong and Jesus is right. But they don't want to say anything too loud, or they'll get put out of their position. You know, that's, you know, we have to be careful. You know, sometimes I'll just be quiet. Somebody might know where I'm going to church down there, and then they'll put me out of this place, you know.
I think it's John's account, isn't it, that where they go in together and ask for the body of Jesus?
I think so. And, in fact, one of the accounts that Pilate wondered he died so quickly. I'm not sure which account it is, but anyway, okay. Next week, which is amazing something. 6, something like that. We'll start there about verse 62.